Not all those who wander are lost. J.R. Tolkien. Welcome to Aegis Travel Adventures. We are Ken
and Gisele. We have been to over 100 countries and are still looking to see what is around the next corner. We love wine,
travel, and adventure. Listen to our podcast where we share the fun of the magical places, people, and cultures that have touched our lives.
Aegis.
Aegis.
Travel.
Travel.
Adventures.
Adventures.
Today we want to talk to you about our trip to Africa, Southern Africa, and about the various parks that we went to and the animals, the diverse amount of animals that are there, including what is called the Big Five.
The Big Five, in case you want to know what they are, is lions, leopards, elephants, African buffalo, and rhinoceros. So Ken, why are they called the Big Five?
Because they're big.
Well, that's true, but the term was coined in late 1800s during Africa's colonial period, and it refers to what trophy hunters used to be considered the most challenging and dangerous animals to hunt on foot. Now, there is still hunting in some of these areas in Africa, but it's very controlled and stuff. But it's getting less and less, which in our opinion is a good thing.
Usually in privately owned game reserves.
Because they're amazing. They're amazing to see, and it is pretty awesome, amazing, whatever words you want to use, when the first time you go into a park and you're driving along and you may see an antelope here and there, and then all of a sudden you see an elephant, and I got teary-eyed. I was like, oh my God, there's an elephant. It's pretty amazing. It's just one of those moments that you remember all your life. Don't you agree?
True, and the first elephant we saw was in Kruger National Park, and we went out on an evening drive. And we hadn't seen a whole lot up to that point. There's lots of antelopes, different ones, impalas, etc. Anyway, over the hill, we saw some ears coming out of the bush, and here emerged was this bull elephant. We didn't know what it was at first, and it comes charging down the hill, and it was a pretty high hill towards us, and then we had 3 safari vehicles, and the drivers go, we need to leave, this is a bull elephant. And
not happy.
And he's not happy. So, we all scattered 3 different ways, and one of the safari wagons with some of the people from our group in it, they did a video of the elephant chasing them down the road, and it went a long way, trying to catch them, I guess, and eventually the elephant stopped and went into the bush. But it was quite an interesting experience, and so for our first Big Five animal in Kruger, it was interesting. However, we did go to other national parks before we went to Kruger, and we did that off of the cruise ship that we were on. It was a Norwegian cruise ship, the Jade. Excuse me.
Well, also, just real quick, getting to about the different animal parks, there's different types. There's the national park, which is what most of them are. They're the larger ones, and they're the ones that are not managed by personnel, if you will. The animals just live and breathe like they would if they were in a national park. So you see, if 2 elephants get into a fight or animals get into a fight and there's a dead elephant there, they don't do anything to remove it. It's just pretty much wildlife on its own, and so that's good. And then, but you do have a limited, because it's so big, you may or may not see everything. Then there's ones that are private parks that are definitely you're going to see more because it's a more concentrated effort. And then there's the fenced game reserves. So those are just the different types. So if you're looking to plan, you can get an idea of what's out there.
And a lot of them are adjacent to each other, and you can go from one to the other. But obviously the private ones, you would have to either pay to go on their land or stay there. And a lot of the lodges on the private concessions are quite luxurious and pricey.
So anyway, so we did that, and we learned all sorts of stuff about bull elephants when they're just starting to be able to mate. They get a little testy and they don't like being around people, and all of a sudden, if you're in their way and they just don't like the way you look, then they're known to chase you. Most of the times, I think people have not had any bad things happen. But again, you're with a guide who knows what they're doing. It's when people start acting on their own, getting out of the vehicle, etc., is that you can have problems. One thing I found that was interesting on these tours is that the animals in the national parks or all the places, they don't see you as an individual. They see us as a safari vehicle. And they're so used to it that they could care less for the most part. It's when people get out or people go off the beaten path that is where you can begin to have a little bit of problems. So that was the big five. And so we were fortunate to see all the big five when we were in these different parks. We saw a leopard for just basically a couple minutes.
In the distance.
Yeah.
Almost like a shadow. So when Gisele was talking about elephants fighting, we did see in Otto Elephant National Park, it was probably a hour and 45-minute drive from the cruise terminal, but we were in the safari vehicle and there was a bull elephant that was dead, and the guide pointed it out that it had gotten into a fight the week before with another bull elephant, and it died from its wounds. And that's kind of nature and what happens. So, yeah, like she said, it was just laying there, and there was obviously buzzards and other animals, taking care of it. But we also went to, and I'll never say it right, Halui Game Reserve off the cruise ship, one of our first stops in South Africa, and it was extremely interesting in that we saw rhinos right away. We did see a lot of animals. That was the one where our guide that drove us there, not our guide in the safari vehicle, but our guide that
we contracted the trip with.
Picked us up at the cruise ship, and at the end of the safari trip, we were waiting for her, and she didn't show up for well after an hour, and it was dark, and we were hearing all kinds of roars and howls and noises.
No cell phone service.
No cell phone service, and eventually she did show up, and we found out that when she was trying to get to us that there were several rhino in the road blocking her, so she went backwards and tried to go a different route, and there were issues there, and so eventually the rhinos moved, and then she picked us up, and fortunately our safari driver did not abandon us, or I think we would have been huddled in the public restrooms.
Still to this day. One thing we really enjoyed with all of our safari tours, that the guides that the parks provide are amazing. They are such talented people, and they've spent years learning about animals and the different scenarios and about how they interact and things like that. And so they do a really good job of keeping you entertained, but more importantly, keeping you informed. And when you're driving along these safaris, you're not guaranteed you're going to see anything. One day you can see literally everything and anything, and then one day you can see absolutely nothing. So one thing that you're guaranteed to see are dung beetles, which are pretty darn fascinating, that we learned, and lots of birds. So they were very good with the filler, as I would say it. As you're driving along, they're going, oh, here's this kind of bird, that kind of bird, and so they're very informative, and they know their stuff really well. So when you have the opportunity to go, I'm sure you'll be as impressed as we were with the guides that handled the trip.
And the guides go through a 3-year training regimen to get their license, and it's pretty rigorous, but I think given the employment situation and et cetera in the southern part of Africa, it's reasonably lucrative compared to other options. And so the training regimen really, I think, puts them heads above what we'd experienced in other places.
And like I said, what I also was impressed with, that they're becoming more and more. They're having more and more women in that position. This is not this is traditionally a male's position, but they are more and more females are becoming tour guides or safari drivers, and that's in fact one park we were at. They were just recently, all they have is female safari drivers, and they're also game preserve people with them, or they are as well. They're like when we do sundowner, which is one of my favorite things. So tell them what a sundowner is.
Well, in the evening before the sun sets, the Safari Lodge offers what I would call the end of the day animal viewing, and then they go to what I call generally a safe place, and everybody gets out of the safari wagons, and you have a good view of the sun setting, and they bring out alcoholic beverages and snacks, and you watch the sunset. And we did it in multiple places. I think probably the most beautiful was just outside of Susavle in the Kalahari Desert. Our lodge had a beautiful area with unique rocks and formations. And we hadn't seen a whole lot of animals on our drive out there. We saw some, but just the beauty of the sunset was worth it by far.
Oh yeah, and again, it's fun to sit and just have a cocktail, meet your other people that you're traveling with. And the other one that we went to that stuck in my mind was we went and they stopped over a lake, overlooking a lake, and they get out the snacks, and so we're chatting, and I noticed that two of the drivers have gotten out and they have guns. And I'm like, well, why do you guys have a gun? And the guy looks at me and he goes, see those rhinoceros? No, I'm sorry, hippos. We don't want them to come any closer. And I said, have you ever had to shoot one? He's like, no. He said, we've had a couple that have gotten a little bit interested. And I just kind of we either move or I fire the gun in the air. He said, but never have they had any incidents.
But they're really fast on land when they want to be.
And they're really big.
And they're probably one of the most dangerous animals in southern Africa.
But so when you're on the safaris, when you're in a park, usually your day consists of 2 safari drives. One is in the morning and early. We're talking 6-ish. So they're going to give you a snack and a cup of coffee to get you going. So you get in your vehicle, and they can be as little as 6, and maybe as 9 in a car or Jeep, and as you're driving along, so you see stuff. It's usually a little chilly in the morning, and then about 10 or 10:30 you'll stop and they'll have coffee and snacks. They keep you very well fed and very hydrated in these things. And then you go look some more animals, and then you come back to your lodge, take a break, have breakfast or lunch, take a break, and then that's in the afternoon you do the sundowner. So that's your typical day when you're at a lodge. So you see lots and lots of animals depending on how many times you're in the lodge, how many days you're in the lodge. So our lodge experiences were really amazing and very interesting. The food for the most part was delish. I think from us we were on, I think it was in Chobe. And we've been giving our driver, we've seen lots of animals, but we had not seen many lions, not very many lions. And so we were giving our driver all sorts of stuff about not seeing lions.
And he said, well, I think tomorrow we'll see some. And so in the morning, we went out, and they use the radios, and they go back and forth between various drivers and various outfits, and they share information. They also stop along the roads and say what they'd seen and so on. And so he got some information that there were some lions. They heard some, and there were some tracks, but the driver said he didn't see them. So we went to this area, and it was relatively bushy, not big trees. And pretty remote. And he hushed us. He said, shh, I hear something. And as it turned out, he says, I think there's some lions just over the bush in there, and I think they're mating. So he goes, what happens in Chobe stays in Chobe, because I'm going to go off-road, and I'm not allowed to do that. So we did. We went off-road, not far, and sure enough, there was a male and a female, and they were making little baby lions, and they could care less that we were there. And I guess one of the interesting things is not only did they not care that we were there, we were awfully close. And lions tend to mate 10, 12, 15 times a day. And so,
Very quickly.
yeah. So for the time we were there, we caught them in their act at least 2 or 3 times, and it was very amazing. And they roar and fight and swat each other, and then the male just goes and falls down.
Yeah, we're gonna put a video up that we were fortunate enough to take about with the lions making baby lions, and it's just really funny. And when we filmed it, everybody at the end, everybody laughs because at the end, as Ken said, the male lion, he does his thing. He just looks at her, then just looked at us and went, and then just flopped down. And everybody's response was just like a man. So anyway, it was quite funny. So we saw that, and so we saw amazing things in our parks. So I would say if it's something that is on your bucket list to do, or you think you're about going, I would definitely take the time to make the effort and go. So, yeah. So anything else you have to add about the safaris?
I think when we got home and we sort of rated the trip versus other trips we'd done, we had to put it up there right at the top with the experiences we had. We did see the big 5. We saw wild dogs. We saw hyenas. We just saw all kinds of animals and birds, and we learned so much. So, it was so much different than going to Europe and looking at cities and, history and so on. But it really was fantastic.
It's well worth it, as I said, to go. We enjoyed it. And so there is the small 5, in case you want to know, which are just small 5 little animals. And then there's the ugly 5, which I thought was kind of fun. So, and one thing when you're on the safari, you're going to get more and more people. You'll learn to know the different type of classifications. So what is a herd of elephants or things like that. And so our guides get to the point where they want to make sure that you know what type of what they are.
What a group of them.
Yeah, what the group are. And so there's all sorts of different kinds, like a buffalo is called a gang of buffalo, or yeah. So it's just we're gonna put a link, and they're kind of fun, and you can impress your friends and family at the next gathering of a different. An elephant is also called a herd or
a parade.
A parade, which I think is really cool because you do see them when they're walking, holding each other's tails, and there's nothing as cute as seeing as a baby elephant. Oh my gosh, they're the cutest thing ever. Unfortunately, when we were at one of the parks, there was an abandoned baby elephant, and they don't know whether the mama abandoned it or most likely it got separated from the herd or the parade and is wandered off too far. So they kept saying, unfortunately, if mama or the elephants don't come back, it will be somebody's lunch. And it's just horrible because you drive by the little baby elephant. We drove about, I think, a couple of days, and he's just looking thinner, or she's looking thinner and thinner, and it's just really sad. But that's nature and that's life, and yeah. So we did see giraffes. The giraffes are again majestic, and they're called a tower of giraffes.
So, my tip for the day: we did rent a car in South Africa, in Cape Town, and we drove out to wine country, and highways were good. Rented it at the airport. It was I wouldn't say a national company, but it was well known in Africa. Just because of the laws and so on, I would recommend getting max insurance that covers everything when you rent a car in some of these, I don't like to call them third world countries, but less developed countries, to avoid issues. You could be getting ready to get on an airplane and they're looking at the car and they have an issue, and you're not going anywhere till they get it resolved or the police get involved. So it's just not the same as renting a car, I think, in Europe or in the US. So and probably consider the big national companies where they're available, because they're more standardized you may pay a little bit more, but I think you have less chance of something getting in the way of you getting on your airplane and heading home.
And so, with regard to that too, I'll piggyback with Ken, is if you're in your car, you don't leave your valuables. I know that's a really silly thing for me to say. Everybody knows that. But especially in a foreign country, you don't want to leave your luggage in your car. You don't want to leave it in the trunk. So don't plan to get a car where your luggage is going to be accessible, because if something happens, then you're basically screwed. So that's I'll piggyback with that with Ken. But my other tip of the day is, which has been very much on our minds, is learning how to travel lightly or pack less. We're about to go on another trip, and we are planning on doing a carry-on for about 6 weeks. So that'll be a big change for us, or mostly I say for me, because usually Ken has my stuff too. So we are trying to do that. So I would suggest, especially on a trip like this, where you're going to be in and out of places, and you're going to be in different cars and trucks and vehicles and things like that, really pare it down. Remember, you don't need to bring the 15 pairs of pants. You need 3 or 4. And there's packing lists of suggestions on people can make all over the internet. See what works for you, but start thinking on how to pack less, because I'm thinking that it's going to be a better way for you to travel, and I'm hoping it's going to be a better way for me to travel.
And make your trip more enjoyable.
Yes, so anyway. So thanks for listening, guys. And again, we will keep you abreast. We're going to do a little more deep dive into Africa on our next podcast, but we want to give you the highlight, which is obviously the animals.
This is Ken.
This is Gisele.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Aegis,
Eagles.
travel,
Travel.
adventures.
Adventure.